The ticking of the cheap plastic wall clock isn't just a sound anymore. It has become a physical sensation, a rhythmic thumping vibrating right behind your eyes, syncing perfectly with the frantic, irregular beating of your heart. You are sitting in the corner of a dimly lit, damp motel room on the absolute fringe of a nameless Eastern European city, staring at a reinforced wooden door that suddenly looks as fragile as wet paper. You haven't slept in 72 hours. Every time you close your eyes, the exhaustion pulls you under, but the sheer primal terror snaps you violently awake, leaving you gasping for air in the cold, stale room. Your hands are trembling so violently that you can't even hold the lukewarm cup of instant coffee resting on your knee. The liquid spills, staining your jeans, but you don't care. Physical discomfort means nothing when you know with absolute terrifying certainty that your hours are numbered. You are breathing. Your chest is rising and falling, blood is pumping through your veins, but make no mistake, you are already a ghost. You try to swallow, but your throat is as dry as ash. The silence in the room is deafening, heavy, and suffocating, broken only by the relentless rain lashing against the grimy window pane. You keep staring at the burner phone sitting on the chipped veneer of the bedside table. It hasn't rung in 2 days. In this specific underworld, silence isn't golden. Silence is a death sentence. It means the hunting phase is over. It means the tracking is done. It means the executioners have been dispatched. You pull your knees to your chest, a grown person reduced to a shivering child. Alker wrapped in a cheap polyester blanket that smells of stale smoke and despair. Every shadow cast by the flickering neon sign outside seems to contort into the shape of a man. Every footstep in the hallway above makes your stomach drop into a bottomless abyss. You are trapped in a psychological purgatory, waiting for the inevitable violence to arrive, and the worst part is the absolute isolation. There is no one to call. The police cannot protect you from these people. Your family has been warned to forget you ever existed for their own survival. You are entirely alone, accompanied only by the crushing weight of your own catastrophic decisions. It didn't start with violence. The descent into hell is rarely a sudden drop. It's a gentle, almost welcoming slope, paved with ego and greed. You were a smart guy. Or at least you convinced yourself you were. You worked as a senior logistics coordinator at the port of Rotterdam. You possessed a master's degree in supply chain management, a comfortable suburban home, a leased German sedan, and a soul-crushing mortgage. You understood the intricate, invisible nervous system of global commerce. You knew how millions of shipping containers moved, how customs algorithms flagged anomalies, and most importantly, how to manipulate the digital paperwork to make a specific container vanish from the grid for just a few crucial hours. You thought you were playing a high-stakes corporate game. When the first approach happened, it was subtle. A well-dressed man at a high-end harbor bar bought you an expensive scotch. He spoke fluent English with a barely noticeable hard Slavic accent. He didn't look like a gangster. He looked like a hedge fund manager. He offered you a sum of money equivalent to your annual salary just to misplace a single transit document for a container arriving from Guayaquil. It felt so incredibly simple. A few keystrokes, a bypassed protocol, and suddenly your bank account in the Cayman Islands was significantly heavier. You convinced yourself it was a victimless crime. You never saw the product. You never touched the weapons or the narcotics. You were just a white-collar facilitator, a ghost in the machine. You thought you were in control, but you didn't understand the machinery you had just become a cog inside. You weren't dealing with street thugs who flash cash and post their crimes on social media. You had unwittingly signed a blood pact with the Balkan Cartel. These weren't men who grew up idolizing movie mobsters. These were men forged in the brutal, merciless crucible of the Yugoslav wars. They were former paramilitaries, special forces operators, and intelligence officers who transitioned their absolute ruthlessness and military discipline into the most efficient, terrifyingly competent, transnational syndicate on the planet. They didn't operate on emotion. They operated on pure, cold logistics. In their world, there is no margin for error, no room for negotiation, and absolutely no concept of forgiveness. For a year, you thrived in this dark economy. You became arrogant. You bought a ridiculously expensive watch. You started looking down on your honest, hard-working colleagues. You mistook their polite professionalism for weakness. Failing to realize that the Balkan fixers treated you with respect only because you were a useful tool. And tools, when they malfunction, are immediately discarded. The illusion of your invincibility shattered on a rainy Tuesday afternoon 3 weeks ago. It was a standard operation. You rerouted the inspection protocols for 3 refrigerated containers, but someone further down the chain got sloppy. A corrupt dock worker panicked, the local authorities moved in too early, and 400 kilos of high-purity product were seized by federal police. The loss was staggering, running into the tens of millions of euros. The panic didn't hit you immediately. You assumed it was part of the business, a calculated risk that massive syndicates simply absorbed. You expected a tense meeting, maybe a reprimand. Perhaps a demand to work for free to cover the margins. You were thinking like a businessman. They were thinking like soldiers who had just been betrayed. The turning point, the exact moment the trap snapped shut on your throat, happened when you were summoned to a discreet brutalist parking garage beneath a commercial plaza. You walked in trying to exude confidence, wearing a tailored suit, clutching your briefcase like a shield. The man waiting for you wasn't the polished handler from the bar. It was a man with cold, dead eyes, a face devoid of any expression, and scars that spoke of unspeakable violence. He didn't yell. He didn't threaten you. He didn't lay a finger on you. He simply handed you a manila envelope. Inside were high-resolution candid photographs, not of you, but of your ex-wife walking her dog. Of your elderly mother buying groceries, of your sister dropping her children off at kindergarten. The photographs were taken that very morning. The man leaned in, his voice a quiet, grating whisper that sounded like grinding stones. "You are a liability," he said simply. "The debt will be settled. Disappear." There was no negotiation, no demand for repayment, just a cold statement of fact. You were no longer an asset. You were a loose end that required cutting. The psychological devastation was absolute and immediate. You didn't walk out of that garage. You fled like a hunted animal. You abandoned the leased car with the keys still in the ignition. You threw your smartphone into a drainage ditch. You accessed a hidden stash of euros you had buried for a rainy day and ran. Why? But where do you run when the enemy has a presence in every major city, eyes in every corrupt police precinct, and an infinite budget to ensure their loose ends stay permanently quiet? The paranoia became your new reality, a toxic, suffocating companion that never leaves your side. The first few days on the run were a blur of fake identities, burner phones, and desperate train rides across borders. You thought Europe was massive, but the Balkan Syndicate makes the continent feel like a tiny, inescapable cage. You began to understand the true horror of being hunted by professionals. It isn't the dramatic shootouts you see in Hollywood. It is the slow, agonizing psychological torture of constant surveillance. You started seeing ghosts everywhere. Was that man reading the newspaper at the Prague train station just a commuter? Or a scout memorizing your face? Why did the black SUV linger at the traffic light a second too long? Why did the receptionist at the hostel look at your fake passport and then quickly glance down at her phone? The psychological toll of this existence is infinitely worse than the threat of physical pain. You have lost your identity. You have lost your dignity. You spend your days hiding in filthy bathrooms, jumping at the sound of a closing door. You eat cold, canned food because going to a restaurant means exposing your face to public cameras. Your expensive tailored suits have been replaced by cheap, oversized, unwashed clothes purchased with cash at thrift stores. You are constantly calculating lines of sight, escape routes, and blind spots. Your brain is permanently locked in a state of high-alert fight-or-flight. Flooding your system with adrenaline until your nervous system simply collapses from the overload. You are rotting from the inside out, consumed by a cocktail of guilt, terror, and absolute regret. You realize now that the Syndicate's greatest weapon isn't their firearms, it is their ability to manipulate your own mind against you. They know that a man running for his life makes mistakes. They know that exhaustion breeds carelessness. They don't need to chase you frantically. They just need to patiently stalk you, letting your own paranoia herd you into a corner. And you have willingly walked right into it. 3 days ago, you spotted him, the cleaner. You were walking through a crowded market in this nameless city, head down, collar up. You glanced at the reflection of a bakery window and saw him. A tall, broad-shouldered man. Impeccably dressed in a dark coat, standing perfectly still amidst the chaotic flow of the crowd, looking directly at your reflection. He didn't run towards you. He just offered a slow, almost imperceptible nod. He was letting you know. The hunt was over. That brings you to this very moment, sitting in this freezing, damp motel room, listening to the relentless ticking of the clock. You have reached the end of the line. The money, the arrogance, the thrill of outsmarting the system. It all feels like a pathetic joke played on a fool. You look at your hands. They are the hands of a coward who thought he could dance with the devil and not get burned. You sacrificed your peace, your family's safety, and your own soul for digital numbers on a screen that you will never live to spend. The cold realization washes over you, bringing a bizarre, a deeply melancholic sense of peace. The panic is slowly receding, replaced by the heavy, numb acceptance of a terminal patient. You don't want to run anymore. You are simply too tired. Your legs feel like lead. Your mind is fractured into 1,000 useless pieces. You look at the reinforced door. You know they won't kick it down. They are professionals. They will pick the lock silently. They will enter the room like shadows. There will be no grand speeches, no dramatic villain monologues. Just a suppressed weapon, a quiet double tap to the back of the head, and a clean exit. You will become just another unsolved statistic, a nameless drifter found in a cheap motel, completely erased from the annals of history. The syndicate's ledger will be balanced, and the machinery of the global underworld will continue to grind forward, yet completely unaffected by your absence. The rain continues to beat against the glass. You slowly stand up from the chair. Your knees pop in the cold air. You walk over to the small cracked mirror above the sink and look at the reflection. You don't recognize the hollowed-out, hollow-eyed ghost staring back at you. You walk back to the bed and sit down on the edge, resting your hands calmly on your lap. You close your eyes, taking one final deep breath of the stale room air. Then you hear it, the soft metallic click of the doorknob turning. That's all for today. The story you just heard is fiction, but the reality of white-collar facilitators targeted by the Balkan Mafia happens every day. If this story made you think, leave a comment telling us your biggest takeaway. Subscribe so you don't miss the next underworld stories. Until next time.